and welcome back to the Second and Two podcast, the show where we talk about all things football. I'm your host, TB. I'm with my co-host, producer extraordinaire, hat connoisseur. He's not wearing one today though, but because he's got the fresh cut, so he had to show off the fresh cut today. Noted Denver Broncos fan, but bandwagon Rams fan. We accepted him. What else? What else we got for you, JD? I gotta make sure I include all the nicknames.
Flipping burgers. You could
Grill Master. My guy Jody. Jody, what's up, man?
What's up, bro? How you been? How's the past week been going?
You know what, man? Things have been pretty bleak in the Ballmer household, considering the Lakers taking this big L 4-0 sweep to the Nuggets.
To watch.
Shout out the Nuggets though, really good team. I'll say it now. I think they're going to win the finals. So
yeah, I could agree with that. I mean, the Heat, they're relying on Jimmy buckets mainly, and then they're shooting. Celtics, they don't know what they're doing right now.
It's a good thing for everyone that this isn't a basketball podcast. I'd probably be going off right now, but save that for the basketball podcast. It's a great thing. This is a football podcast, and we're in the pretty dead period of the offseason. OTAs are starting, which is kind of fun, but also sort of meaningless because half the players don't actually go to OTAs these days. Yeah. But it's something, right? And in the end of May, middle of June is that point of the football offseason where we're kind of just looking for anything to talk about. So these next few weeks we'll be talking about each division, giving you a little bit of preview for the 2023 season. Joe, who we starting with today?
Today we're starting with the AFC East, if I'm not mistaken. So we're looking at the Jets, the Bills, the Patriots, and the Dolphins, right?
I believe so, my friend. As Jody said, we got the AFC East starting up today. I think we'll just start with some interesting tidbits about the AFC East. For one, the Bills are the only team in that division that play someone coming off a bye, which is important. We'll kind of talk about that as we go in terms of why it's so important to play teams coming off a rest, or what the rest advantage means. Some other stuff that I wrote down. Did you know, Jody, that the Pats won the AFC East every year from 2009 to 2019?
Yeah. Tom Brady. I could have told you that one.
The Brady era, bro. Every year from 2009 to 19. That's a
lot of years, though.
That's dominance, man. That's 11 straight years.
That's our childhood from like 6th grade forward.
Yeah, pretty much. Now,
I thought for the first one you were telling us with the Bills, I thought you were going to tell us that they're the only team to have not made the Super Bowl, or doesn't have a Super Bowl win.
That's coming. Bills fans are already getting anxious right now. Now, positive for the Bills, they've won this division each of the last 3 years. So once they took it from Brady, or I guess Brady left the division, they kind of took the torch and have won it each of the last 3 years. The Dolphins last won this division in 2008. That was Bill Parcells taking over, if you remember, kind of taking over as an executive. Tony Sparano, I believe, was the head coach. Rest in peace. But it's been a while for the Dolphins fans since they've won the division. The Jets, though, haven't won the division since 2002. They have a playoff drought right now since 2010.
That's tough. Mark Sanchez.
Yeah, Mark Sanchez, right? Yeah. So now, interestingly enough, this division has had at least 2 playoff teams in 5 of the last 6 years. Now, what's also interesting is they haven't had their wild card team doesn't make it out of the first round. They haven't had a team do that since 2010 when the Jets went to the AFC Championship. So generally it appears this division puts two teams in the playoffs, but one's going to lose in the wild card and the other one's probably going to lose in the divisional round. Is pretty much how it's been for each of the last three, 5 of the last 6 years. Yeah, the Bills fans are not happy. And finally, maybe worse for last, if you're a Bills fan, the Bills are the only team in the division that hasn't won a Super Bowl, of course, famously going 4 times in a row in the 90s and not winning one. So, yeah, that's a little bit of a divisional overview for you. I mean, Joe, as we look at this division, I personally, sitting here today, feel like you're probably going to see 2 playoff teams come out of this division. I think that feels likely. I don't know how you feel.
That makes sense. I mean, you're looking at the Jets most likely and probably the Bills. I mean, like you said, the Bills have won their division the last 3 years. So it feels like they wouldn't take that much of a step back. And then the Jets, with the new addition of Aaron Rodgers, you could expect them to not only make the playoffs, but potentially even division in some cases.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would say, the Dolphins, they were a playoff team last year. They added some interesting pieces in the offseason, namely Jalen Ramsey. And then the Patriots, it feels like you can never count them out as long as Bill Belichick is their head coach. I mean, and he added an actual real offensive coordinator this offseason, so that's a step in the right direction for Mac Jones. But obviously, we're going to dive deep into all these teams and kind of consider all of those things. So we're going to start with the New York Football Jets. Go ahead, take it away, Joe.
Yeah, so the Jets, their record last year, they finished at 7-10. That left them 4th in their division overall, which is kind of shocking because they had a good defense in my eyes. They did pretty well, but not really. Let's see, they missed the playoffs, as I just mentioned. Let's see, what was some key additions and losses of players that you see that they did?
Well,
over the
I think you look at it, and this may be something that went under the radar, but they lost Mike White in free agency, actually to the Dolphins, a division rival. And Mike White was the guy who played pretty well when he was healthy, when he had to come in and play for Zach Wilson. And, he had some issues with his ribs down the stretch, and so they struggled actually without him. I think that's a sort of underrated guy that they lost in the offseason. They also lost guard Dan Feeney, wide receiver Elijah Moore, a D lineman Sheldon Rankins, and then another guard Nate Herbig. All names that I don't know unless you're a Jets fan. A lot of people are clamoring about, but also all pretty good players, I would say. Elijah Moore had an interesting year last year. That was probably a mutually beneficial move for both sides for him to move on, honestly, after he had a big 2021 and then 2022 was just not his year. He didn't quite fit with that offense last year and some of the young receivers that they brought in that sort of supplanted him. And then, of course, the big-time addition of Aaron Rodgers, and it seemed like he brings with him a crew of players, including Alan Lazard and Randall Cobb. Another big-time signing, though, for them was safety Chuck Clark, who should instantly be a starter for them. And then also a little bit underrated, maybe, or not as much talked about, receiver Mecole Hardman from Kansas City. But those weren't their only additions, Joe. They added some guys in the draft too, huh?
Yeah, so they drafted Will McDonald, the edge rusher, in that first round that we talked about. And let's see, they have the center. They added Joe Tippmann and a tackle. So they beefed up the line on both sides and that tackle's going to be Carter Warren. Could be huge for Aaron Rodgers. I mean, gotta protect him.
No doubt.
And then their staff, their coaching staff that they have on hand, they have their general manager, Joe Douglas, head coach, Robert Salah. Coordinator is going to be Nathaniel Hackett, also his old OC in Green Bay. And defensive coordinator is going to be Jeff Ulbrich. Don't know if I got that one right.
Yeah. I think obviously, I said Rodgers brings together a crew with him, Alan Lazard and Randall Cobb. I mean, Nathaniel Hackett, once the Jets went and got him as their offensive coordinator, it became very clear that the Aaron Rodgers idea was more than just an idea. It seemed like it could become pretty likely he would become a Jet, which obviously came to fruition. And it's interesting, Rodgers had multiple MVP seasons with Hackett as his offensive coordinator. He has publicly said that Hackett is his favorite coach that essentially he's ever had. And I think that's a big deal for him in terms of, it's clear that Rodgers feels comfortable with certain coaches and certain players, right? So having Nathaniel Hackett as his offensive coordinator and having Alan Lazard and Randall Cobb, receivers that he's played with, be on the team, I think is pretty important to him. And so clearly he's already making himself at home in New York. I think that's probably a good thing for the Jets, quite frankly. The more at home he feels and the more productive he is, the better off they're going to be. So all of the moves by the Jets, they make sense on the outside looking in. If we just kind of go through and look at their depth chart right now, at center, it looks like Joe Tippmann will likely step in and start pretty early as their being their second round pick. They have at the guard spot Elijah Vera Tucker, a high pick from before. Now, there was a lot of thought that Mekhi Becton would become the right tackle, but he actually recently, I think it was just either today or yesterday, and this obviously haven't updated it yet. It appears he was released. So that may, there's a real deal with essentially he hurt his right knee last season playing right tackle, and I guess he kind of told the Jets that he didn't feel comfortable playing there. He was putting a lot of pressure on his knee, and his knee wasn't feeling right. That right knee. He kept telling him he wanted to play left tackle. I think from the Jets' perspective, they looked at it as like an ego thing. Like, okay, you want to be a left tackle, but you're not a left tackle right now. You're going to be better for us at the right tackle spot. He was looking at it like, no, this is like my right knee's hurting. It's better for me to go play left. Yada, yada, yada. Eventually, he hurts that knee more seriously and kind of misses most, if not all, of the year. And now it comes to a head where you think going into OTAs, he's going to be their right tackle, and now it appears he will obviously not be with the team. So that's obviously at this point, now with that news, not going to be Mekhi Becton. It'll probably be Max Mitchell, it appears. At the left guard spot, they added Langston Tomlinson, and then at left tackle, Dwayne Brown. So it'll be interesting to see. The Jets' offensive line is going to be critical in terms of keeping Aaron Rodgers upright, who presumably is their starting quarterback. Breece Hall slots back in at running back, I believe, once he's healthy. They also have Zonovan Knight, who should be able to take some carries while Breece Hall is getting right, and hopefully they think Breece Hall.
Carter?
Say it again.
Michael Carter, is he still there?
He may be the third back at this point, but and then Zach Wilson, will still likely be the backup to Aaron Rodgers right now. We'll see. At receiver, they actually have a lot of receivers. If you look at them now, they have Garrett Wilson at that number one receiver spot, backing him up. They still have Corey Davis, who they signed a few years ago in free agency. At the slot receiver, there's a real interesting battle there between Randall Cobb and Mecole Hardman. I think that Cobb is going to get the nod just because he's played with Rodgers for so long and Rodgers is comfortable with him. But, I think they'll certainly use Mecole Hardman. And then at the other receiver spot, they have Alan Lazard and Denzel Mims, who they just drafted. So there's a decent group of 6 legitimate receivers that I think can all help them. They also have 2 tight ends that I like, CJ Uzomah and Tyler Conklin. So from the skill position standpoint, I think the Jets certainly have enough. What the real question will be for them is up front on that offensive line. Can they get right? Especially, moving on from Mekhi Becton so early after drafting him. That draft now appears to look not very good for them. And then defensively, you look at up front, they're going to have an impressive group with, John Franklin Myers, who signed a long-term deal last offseason, Quentin Jefferson. Backing him up is actually Solomon Thomas, who played for Robert Saleh in San Francisco, understands that system, pretty productive player. Never quite lived up to being the number 3 pick, but still a very good rotational defensive lineman to have. And then Quinnen Williams, obviously there's a little bit of a deal going on there with him wanting a new long-term deal and the Jets trying to figure that out. And then also at the edge, you have Carl Lawson and their newly drafted first-round pick, Will McDonald. So they have a really good group of guys up front. It's part of what, Joe, you said earlier that last season they were pretty good defensively, and I would second that 100%. They were really good defensively. And part of it was because they have this huge front, it's full of dudes, really good players. And, adding Will McDonald in the draft just gives them another pass rushing option. Adding Solomon Thomas obviously helps as well. Then also, another edge defender that they have in that rotation, Jermaine Johnson, who they drafted last season out of Florida State, who also had a pretty productive rookie year. So a lot of really good players up front. In the linebacker core, you got Quincy Williams and CJ Mosley. Also, Zaire Barnes may give them some run. And then in the secondary, the tandem of CJ Reed and Sauce Gardner were a revelation last year at corner.
Yeah.
Jordan Whitehead at safety, bringing in Chuck Clark to play the other safety spot. And then they've got Jamie and Sherwood as like the nickel corner, third safety, whatever you want to call it, to help in that Robert Saleh 4-man, cover 3 look that they're in most of the time. So I think there's plenty of talent on this team. Certainly adding Rodgers upgrades them. But, a big part of this is going to be, what kind of start they can get off to and what their schedule looks like. So that's important to look at too.
Yeah, I had a quick question before we take a look at their schedule. It's kind of dumb, but I was going to say, do you think Sauce Gardner and Aaron Rodgers are beefing at all? Just based off vibes, My guy went out there, threw on the cheese head last year.
Well, it's interesting, yes, he did. But then if you notice, Sauce Gardner was big in like trying to recruit Aaron Rodgers there. And they actually went to a Knicks game together like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, I did see that. It was like them in like Priest Hall, I think.
Yeah, so I think it's more of a big bro, little bro thing now at this point than any kind of beef. So I'm sure that I think Sauce is probably just happy to have that guy on his team now.
Yeah, a quarterback they could all get behind. Hopefully, make plays for them.
Yeah,
but yeah. Looking ahead to that schedule for next year, we got a great week 1. We got the Jets versus, or I guess week 1 matchup for them. I don't know, that sounds very broad when I said it the first time. So yeah, their first game they're playing Monday night against the Bills. That comes off hot, straight divisional game already.
Yeah.
After that, they fly out to Jerry World, play the Cowboys. Then they go back home, play the Patriots that following week for week 3. Then we get another fun one, another team that's always fun to watch. We got the Chiefs. They're playing them Sunday night for week 4. And they fly out to Denver, and Daniel Hackett gets to go back there after a year.
Yeah, I'm sure he's going to be
Denver.
Sure he's going to be amped for that one.
Yeah, the fans are going to show him some love,
Yeah.
Let's see. Then week 6, they go back home, play the Eagles. Then they get their bye week 7. How do you feel about the week 7 bye? Is that a little early for you? What do you think?
Well, I mean, this is what I would say. Obviously, if you're getting your bye week before week 8, it definitely feels early in the season, probably makes things a little tougher. And quite frankly, though, like looking at the schedule, the toughest part of their schedule is those first 6 weeks are brutal.
Yeah.
I mean, just what you just laid out, the only thing that's really helpful for them is that 4 out of those 6 games are at home. So you do get to be at home quite a bit, but you're talking 2 primetime games, one against a divisional opponent. You have to go to the Cowboys, and then you have to go 2 Mile High, right? Those are 2 tough environments to play in. You're playing the defending NFC champs and the Eagles, the defending Super Bowl champs and the Chiefs. The Patriots, a division opponent. And then the Broncos is all the baggage that, just Nathaniel Hackett personally has. And then having to go 2 Mile High and, play at Denver, that's not a tough, not an easy place to play. So I just think the Jets have to weather the storm of those first 6 weeks.
Yeah.
It's going to be a really tough slate of games for them to open the year with, without Rodgers having any kind of benefit of like getting on track with his guys and coming out of the gates. You got to come out of the gates and you're playing at home versus the Bills on Monday Night Football, right? Like, this is your chance to let the country know, if the Jets are going to be real this year or not. And I think a lot of Jets fans are kind of, I don't know if anyone's like Eagles fans, but Jets fans are like Eagle fans in the sense that they're going to either jump on the bandwagon and be all in, or if you're not performing, they're going to be upset. So I feel like it's so imperative for the Jets to just weather this storm. And I actually think, considering those first 6 weeks being so brutal, the week 7 bye is not the worst thing in the world. And the nice thing is, you could look at it coming out of the bye, and I'll let you kind of take it away from there. But like, really coming out of the bye, they get 2 home games after the bye, and they get the home game against the Eagles, they get the bye, and then they get 2 home games coming out of that. It's not a bad stretch there.
Yeah, so week 8, like you said, they have to. You could say they quote unquote get the home game, quote unquote have to travel. You know what I mean? But they're playing New York, and then they're playing the Giants, so they just got to flip locker rooms, I guess. I don't really know.
Yeah.
Let's see. Week 9, they're playing the Chargers at home. Monday night game as well. Could be fun. You got the young blood Herbert, Justin Herbert, coming out here playing the savvy vet Aaron Rodgers. Then they got to travel to Las Vegas. They're playing the Raiders. Another Sunday night game, another primetime back-to-back right there.
Yep.
Then they go out to Buffalo week 11. What is that? Is that like November time? Could be snowing, maybe. Who knows?
Yeah.
But nothing Aaron Rodgers isn't used to at this point.
True.
And then week 12, they're playing the Dolphins at home. It's on Black Friday. This is the first Friday game we get to see.
Black Friday game. Yep. That should be a fun one, actually. Jets, Dolphins, kind of, they won't have played each other yet. That's like the start, kicks off the back half of the year for the Jets. Yeah, that should be a fun game.
Yeah, then the last 6 we're rolling. Week 13, the Falcons at home, Texans at home. Then they go out to Miami, play the Dolphins again. And they got the Commanders at home, and then their last 2 games are both on the road. They're playing the Browns on a Thursday night game, and the Patriots in Gillette Stadium.
Yeah, I think, like I said, the toughest stretch of that schedule, I think, is going to be the opening 6 weeks. But I do think they have a stretch of games, weeks 13 through 17, that are pretty winnable. Like, they get the Falcons and the Texans home back to back. And really they get the 3-game homestand with the Dolphins Black Friday, then the Falcons and the Texans at home. They go to the Dolphins, but then they come back home and they get to play the Commanders. And I think that trio of the Falcons, Texans, Commanders could be 3 of the, bottom 6-7 teams in the league this year.
Yeah.
So you get those 3 at home, and then your 2 road games are the Browns and Dolphins. Like, going to Miami in December is not the worst thing in the world, quite frankly. And then the Browns, it's a Thursday night football game. Who knows? That could be, that Browns game feels like it's either going to be a really tough game or, a game where they should feel good about winning. And then obviously finishing the year at the Patriots it's not easy. But I think that week like 12 to 16 range for them is the easiest stretch of their schedule, with the toughest games in there being, those 2 Dolphins divisional games. But I don't know, Jay. I mean, you see it any differently in terms of the tough and the easy stretches of their schedule?
No, I mean, in terms of like a 4-week range, I think that's about as best you could get right there.
Yeah.
I mean, if anything, maybe after their bye week, coming off that bye, you get staying in New York versus the Giants. You get the Chargers at home and the Raiders. Like maybe, like not necessarily the Chargers, but the Raiders could be easy. The Giants could be potentially easy. I mean, I'm not trying to knock either of those teams, but the Giants have had to claw for all their wins last year, winning by a couple
Mhm.
points, and the Chargers, like they always have that injury bug. So who knows week 9 if anything has happened to
Yeah.
them or not. The Raiders,
Agreed.
I think there's still a question mark there with Jimmy G, but that's a conversation for another day.
Correct. Correct. Yeah, I mean, I think there's an element where they start slow but finish strong.
Yeah,
I would guess with Rodgers just getting acclimated to what they do, and despite having Nathaniel Hackett and Alan Lazard and Randall Cobb, it is still a new environment for the first time ever in his career. So
so yeah, it'll be fun to watch them. Let's see. So out of their the 17 games, what do you think their record's gonna end up coming out to be?
well, I mean, I think they're going to end up being 11-6. Um, just looking at it, they, like I said, I think they start slow. Maybe they crawl to the bye at 3-3. But I think if they get to that bye week at 3-3, that's a total win for them.
Yeah,
Uh, and then maybe they finish the year strong coming out of the bye, winning 8 out of their last 11. That's kind of how I see it. That's my guess, because they do have some tough divisional games. That division is not easy. The AFC East is going to be a really tough division this year, I believe.
true.
And then having to play the AFC West and the NFC, the NFC East, are not easy draws. I mean,
Yeah.
the schedule is not great, very accommodating, even for a team that finished last in their division last year. So obviously, like I said, there's a definite stretch on the back half of their season of winnable games, but
True.
I see them going 11-6. What about you?
I have them doing a little bit better at 13-4. I mean, the way I say, I think like you said, the first 6 games are gonna be tough,
Yeah.
but I think like over the course of the year, they'll probably split it with the Bills. Maybe they lose the first one, but win the second one. I don't really know. That Cowboys game, I feel like the Cowboys are gonna come out slow in the beginning of the year. I don't know who their week 1 matchup is, but that's just the way I see it. Patriots seems like a very winnable game. Same with the Broncos. Chiefs and Eagles, I think they win maybe one of those two. Don't know which one. So I have them coming out 4-2 off the rip, and then
Hmm.
only losing 2 other games. Maybe, like I said, like they split one with the Bills. Sorry, and then in those other games, like they win or they lose a couple games by a couple points. Like that Giants I was talking about, how they lost
Mhm.
by very very close game at the end, probably something like that. But I don't really know who that could be besides maybe the Chargers and the Giants
Okay.
in my eyes.
Yeah, I think um, they are going to be a team that people have their eye on all year. Of course, I mean
Yeah,
they got 5 primetime games plus the Black Friday game, so they're definitely an intriguing team that I think a lot of people are excited to watch because everyone wants to know if Rodgers still has it, right?
true. And if that's the missing piece from last year, like everyone
Yeah.
said. One quick note before we flip the page. Did you make that Aaron Rodgers photo right there?
Oh, little A-Rod switch
In the
up
New
with
York?
the
Yeah.
jersey. Little A-Rod edit. Yeah, I got you.
How'd you come up with 8?
That's his number. That's what he said he's going to wear.
Oh, okay. I was gonna say,
Yeah, yeah,
his
yeah.
number's 12, but I mean,
Yeah,
that's why I was
he
wondering.
said he's going to wear number 8 in New
Oh,
York.
Kobe. Now I got
He-
high expectations.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, who are we looking at next in the division?
Well, I did want to look at
Oh yeah, my bad.
the
I forgot about this.
the Jets.
Any
I
trends?
think.
Yeah.
Well, I'm curious. I want to know. I started asking myself. I was looking at this thing, and I said, well, is Rodgers still elite, and how does he change the Jets' offense if he is like? Because I think that's a real question on everyone's mind. Is how good can Aaron Rodgers still be at this age? I mean, you look at he was the MVP in 2020 and 2021, back to back. And then you look at his decline in 2022 and you ask yourself if that was a product of what was going on around him or if that was a product of him getting too old,
Yeah.
And so I want to, I was kind of asking myself, like, how efficiently can he slide into this Jets team and their culture and fit in New York? And, but really I was looking at I watched a lot of Jets tape in terms of what they ran offensively last year and what was Zach Wilson doing, because obviously he caught a lot of flack, right? And so
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of plays like this. This is third and pardon the tape here a little bit. We got a little bit of choppy green flashing tape here just for a second. But this is 3rd and 7 against the Steelers this year, a game that actually the Jets ended up winning. But you can see Zach Wilson is looking to this far side. This is Garrett Wilson, right? His best receiver.
Yeah.
And so he's trying to get the ball to his playmaker. And he does, and he gets it to him, but it's short of the sticks, right? And if you go back, if I can start this thing over, you'll see over here, as he's staring at his receiver to that side, look at Corey Davis at the top of the screen coming wide open,
Toasted.
right? He never gets
or even
over
the
there.
dude running across the middle right there, like.
Yes. He sticks on Garrett Wilson because he says, that's my best guy. I need to get him the football. And he doesn't go through the progression. And so now, yes, he completes a pass, but it's short of the sticks. And so it doesn't keep the possession moving, right? And he misses that ball over the top. Now, you consider this in a 3rd and 5, similar set, different area of the field, but very similar lineup from, in terms of their formation from the Packers. And again, his best receiver, Devontae Adams, is over on this single cut side. And you'll see what Rodgers does and why he's so good. For one, in the 3rd and 5 situation, everyone, if they understand football, is yelling, watch hard count, right? Hey, earmuffs, don't listen, right? And he gets them to jump. So that's one. Rodgers is a master at getting that free play on 3rd down. Yep. He loves it. Right? He's going to look initially to this side, right? But look where the safety is. That guy is shading to Devontae Adams, right? In a one high safety look, you've got man all across the board. He's going to shade that way. Rodgers is going to look there initially, but eventually he gets back to the field and he's going to find his guy. And in a very similar route concept, a guy has his man beat one-on-one and he gets it to him. And that's really the difference between what Zach was doing last year and what Rodgers could potentially give them this year. Not only the hard count, the wherewithal to get the Vikings to jump, but then also the ability to get through his progressions quicker and find guys open, not latch on. And you can see it from this angle really well. Initially, his eyes are over here, and he's going to get over here really quick because he sees that safety in the middle of the, not in the middle of the field, really shading towards his best guy. So he says, okay, that means I have all one-on-ones to the field. I'm going to get back. And I'm going to trust that one of my guys gets one-on-one and wins. And, Marquez Valdez-Scantling in this case does, and he gets him the ball. And so again, if we go back to the very first play, looking at Zach Wilson again, you can see right here, Corey Davis is wide open. And again, the safety is shading where? Over towards this side of the field. And so it's a very similar play where he sticks on and forces the ball to his best receiver. Rodgers is able to get off of it and get to the next, get to the true one-on-one and trust his other guys to make plays. And I think that's the real difference right now and what these two offenses potentially look like, between having Wilson last year and now Rodgers this year. I think the other thing is the tandem of Nathaniel Hackett and Aaron Rodgers as a duo versus LaFleur and Zach Wilson. One, I think Rodgers and Hackett are much more on the same page. But two,
True.
I think they're just the older, like more efficient, done it more version of what the Jets had last year. LaFleur is not running an offense that's that different from what Hackett's going to run. Very, zone based, run some RPOs here and there. They're going to attack the field vertically, right? Like all that stuff's still pretty similar. They're not changing much schematically, but what you are getting is a more polished version in a play caller, I think, in Nathaniel Hackett. For all his faults as a head coach last year, I think he's still a very good play caller. And then Rodgers, being the wiser, maybe more advanced version of what Wilson gives you. Because, the thing that people liked about Wilson was his ability to throw off platform, his ability to extend plays, his ability to play off schedule. Well, Rodgers does all that, but he's also wily enough at this point in his career and, has seen enough football that he's very efficient on schedule. And he only plays off schedule when he absolutely has to. Wilson tried to kind of do that too much. And he tried to live in that. And I think that's the problem that so many young quarterbacks have. And so, I think this team will be much better for all of those reasons. Even if you have a slightly diminished version of Rodgers to the 2021 season, but maybe a little bit better version of what you got in 2022, this team with this defense could be potentially very good. That's why I have them finishing 11-6.
Feel that. Yeah. It's interesting to see just like the more zoned in that Zach Wilson was on one dude, especially. I mean, I guess he has two on that side of the field, so it was a little different, but that could just be like the maturity thing or like growth factor, not having that
No
much
doubt.
time in the league.
No
But we're gonna
doubt.
be
And I think it'll probably be good for Zach Wilson to play, to be around Aaron Rodgers for a year and to see what that looks like. And then next year we'll see what happens, whether this is a 1-year deal with Rodgers, 2-year deal, whatever. Maybe Wilson moves on, maybe Rodgers moves on. I don't know. But
yeah.
this year he'll get with Rodgers, I think should be very helpful to him if he has any chance at salvaging his career.
Yeah, I feel that. Looking ahead for the next team in the division, we're looking at the Dolphins. They finished 9-8 last year, being second in the division, just squeezing it into the playoffs, and they lost in the wild card. Who do you think they lost was like a big loss for them? I got one in mind, but
Well, I mean, I think the biggest one is they didn't really use Mike Gesicki at tight end.
yeah,
Not like they did a better job with him last year. Obviously, they tried to trade him going into the year, didn't quite work out, and with the writing was on the wall when they tried to trade him. But for that being the case, I thought he had a pretty productive year. Clearly, not the same as his 2020 year, I think, where he was really really good. So he was a semi big loss. I mean, I think the bigger loss maybe was their safety Eric Rowe. That was kind of a big deal. They are replacing a punter. That's something that people generally are like, oh, the punter. But like that makes a big difference in field position. So
yeah,
Thomas Morstead is a very good veteran punter, had been doing it in the league forever. And so that's something that, to keep your eye on, that they make sure they have a competent punter. And then Melvin Ingram, twilight of his career, he won't be back. So not a whole lot to speak of in terms of the losses. The
yeah.
real
The key
the
addition.
real attention was on the additions. Trading for Jalen Ramsey, signing David Long Jr., signing Mike White to be the backup quarterback as insurance for Tua, and
True.
then also bringing in Dan Feeney. So brought in a couple of Jets that were big losses for the Jets, big additions for the Dolphins, right? So I do think while the Jalen Ramsey is the splashy headline, those other three guys, particularly David Long Jr., are going to make this team a lot better going into 2023.
Yeah, and a couple dudes that they drafted that we talked about too. They had Cam Smith, corner,
Love Cam Smith.
Devin A. Chain, the running back.
I like A-Chain.
I forgot where he was from. Was he
Texas A&M.
Texas A&M? Okay, yeah. Oh, they had Elijah Higgins as a receiver and a tackle, Ryan Hayes. So they beefed up decent amount of the skill positions right there from the draft.
Yep.
Hopefully one of them pans out. Let's see, their general manager that they got is Chris Greer. I don't know which one's
Greer.
correct. Sorry about that. Greer. There it is. Mike McDaniel. No S on that man. Also at the Miami game recently, if you've seen that.
Yeah, I
The
did.
offensive coordinator is Frank Smith, and they got the DC Vic Fangio, also another former Bronco guy.
A lot of former Broncos head coaches. They've, unfortunately for you, Joe, and your fandom, have had a
Yeah.
lot of them in recent
Yeah.
years. Vic Fangio comes much heralded after taking basically a season off. Um, he's gonna make a real difference in that Dolphins defense in terms of what they're doing. I'll probably go into that a little bit for you schematically, why they're going to look so different this year with Vic Fangio versus what they had last year. But that's, adding Vic Fangio and Jalen Ramsey and David Long Jr. to that defense should be make it look very different. Just going through their projected starters. Obviously, they have Teron Armstead at left tackle, Liam Eichenberg at the left guard spot. They brought in Connor Williams and Dan Feeney to compete at center. Then at right guard, Robert Hunt, the famous, many people may know him as the famous offensive lineman touchdown against the Ravens on Thursday Night Football a couple years ago. And then Austin Jackson at right tackle. They also brought in Isaiah Wynn to possibly compete at one of those tackle spots. So I think offensively up front, they should be good enough to keep Tua on his feet this year. Obviously, big story for them is, if Tua can stay healthy and not, get another concussion, obviously for both the Dolphins season, but then also just for his long-term health as a person. A lot of people
For
were
his
worried about him.
longevity in this NFL.
Yeah, but even just living his life,
Yeah. No, I mean, you're not wrong.
life after football, just hope that dude does not get another concussion. I'll probably watch Dolphins games and really be like, please keep Tua safe. And then at running back, they're super deep. Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson Jr., both guys that, Mike McDaniel worked with in San Francisco. And then they had, drafted Devin Achane, who, if you guys remember, my comp for him was Lamar Miller, a former Dolphin running back. So a lot of speed in that backfield now, a lot of versatility. I know Mike McDaniel's going to have a good time with those guys. And then finishing off the skill positions, they have Jalen Waddle, River Craycraft, Tyreek Hill, Cedric Wilson, Chosen Anderson, and Braxton Berrios as their receiving group.
Also another check guy.
Yeah. Yeah, Robbie Chosen Anderson is an interesting guy. Braxton Berrios, yes, another former Jet they were able to add on. And then at tight end should be kind of interesting this year with the loss of Gesicki. Durham Smythe should step into the role, and then Eric Saubert is another guy that could potentially play there for them. It's just a spot to keep your eye on for them as the year goes. Defensively, though, is where it gets real interesting in terms of what they've got going on. I mean, at the edge positions, Jalen Phillips, Bradley Chubb, Andrew Van Ginkel, and Zach Seiler make up their edge players. That's a pretty good group. Obviously they traded for Bradley Chubb in the middle of the season last year, came in and gave them an extra pass rushing punch. Jalen Phillips was really good down the stretch for them, especially when they lost Tua and they really had to rely on their defense a little bit more. And then, Raekwon Davis and Christian Wilkins inside are two big dudes. They lack a little bit of depth behind those guys, but certainly will lean on those guys, I think. And then at the linebacker spots, they have a awesome duo of Jerome Baker and now David Long Jr. Those are two really good linebackers. Probably, if you're looking across the league, I don't know if there are a whole lot of teams that have two guys that are, I think, as good as as good and as young as these two guys are. And then, you look at their secondary. I believe my personal opinion is Cam Smith, their second round pick, is probably going to slide into the slot. Kader Kohu has played there for them last year, but I kind of think Cam Smith is a more talented player. They spent that second round pick on him. I think that's where he'll likely play, unless Xavier Howard becomes a cap casualty, because he hasn't been able to stay healthy very much. But likely, I think it's Jalen Ramsey, Xavier Howard on the outside, Cam Smith in the slot, and then you've got Javon Holland and then Brandon Jones and Deshaun Elliott are in a fun position battle for that other safety spot with the loss of Eric Rowe. So that's what you're looking at for that Dolphins defense.
Yeah, sitting here, I don't want to get ahead of myself, so I'm gonna just talk about the schedule real quick, actually.
Okay.
So they start off on the road. They go to LA playing the Chargers, and they play the Patriots in Gillette Stadium on a Sunday night game, week 2. Then they have their first home game versus the Broncos, week 3. And then they're back traveling. They're going to Buffalo playing the Bills, week 4. Let's see, week 5 we're playing at home, Miami, against the Giants, and they stay there, play the Panthers. Then they're back on the road, Philly, Sunday night game. And then they're going home week 8, playing the Patriots. And then I got the ultimate travel here. They got to go to Germany, playing the Chiefs. That's going to be tough. And they get their bye week for that following week at week 10. Playing in Vegas here. Or no, not in Vegas, sorry. They're playing Las Vegas at home. Week 11, week 12, they're playing the Jets. That's a Black Friday game as well. Oh, wait.
Yeah.
Same game. Never mind.
Yeah.
Don't
The
listen to
Black
me.
Friday game.
Yeah. I was like, wow, we have 2. And then I was like, wait, that's the same game we just talked about. Week 13, they're playing in DC, playing the Commanders. Week 14, Monday night game, they're playing the Titans at home. And they're staying at home playing the Jets. And they got the Cowboys at home. So a nice little 3-week stay at home. Then they're on the road the last 2 games. They got the Bills week 18. Sorry, got ahead of myself. Week 17, they're playing the Ravens. So a couple fun ones right there at the end as well.
Yeah, I would say that final 4 games is a brutal stretch for the Dolphins, and they have to finish the last 2 on the road, but to play the Jets, the Cowboys, the Ravens, and the Bills to finish the year, that could be potentially 0-4,
Yeah.
those are 4.
December, not taking a dub in December.
Seriously, like that's a brutal stretch. Those 4 teams could all be fighting for playoff spots. I think we anticipate all 4 of those teams, pending injury, would all be playoff teams this year. And so that's a really rough finish, and also have to finish at the Ravens and at the Bills. You could be playing, back-to-back snow games, in January to finish the year as a, warm weather team. Gosh, that's just brutal to me. So yeah, those final 2 in the cold at the very least. Yeah, that last 4 games I think is a really tough stretch. However, I would say that they do have a nice stretch, week 3 through 6, where they get to play 3 of those 4 games at home, and those 3 out of the 4 are, versus the Broncos, the Giants, and the Panthers. I think those are 3 very winnable games for them early in the year. You think if you're catching the Broncos early in the season, I think that's better, while Sean Payton and Russell Wilson are still getting on the same page. Catching the Panthers in week 6 with their rookie quarterback earlier in the year, I think that's also probably better for them. I think the Giants, we'll see what happens with the Giants. They paid some guys this offseason. They potentially got better, maybe not. We talked about, I think you mentioned they won a lot of games close last year, so maybe there's a little bit of regression to the mean for them this year. So those are 3 variable winnable games. Obviously, the at Bills, not fantastic.
Not the easiest thing.
Yeah. So, but I think this is a favorable stretch for them, kind of in the beginning of the year, and then obviously having the really tough finish to end the year out.
Yeah. So with that being said, where do you think they finish overall on the season?
Well, looking at it, I think they're a 10-7 football team. I think last year they were 9-8, and I think they got better. They finished 9-8 with their quarterback missing multiple games, their defensive coordinator getting fired, and yet they made the playoffs. They finished 9-8, and they were very competitive in a playoff loss against the Bills. And so when I look at their roster, I think they got better. I see no reason why they wouldn't be a better football team this year, unless you just do not believe in Tua Tagovailoa at all. But I saw enough from him in Mike McDaniel's offense last year that I believe in that offense, and I believe that defense will be much improved under Vic Fangio. I think they play in a really hard division. I think they have some tougher games, especially that finish at the end of the year. However, I think I see them being improved as a football team, so therefore I gave them the 10-7 record.
Yeah, I mean, when I first did this, I thought, there's going to be some regression in my eyes. I don't know why. Just simply, I guess I had some question marks. But as I sat here this whole time, I was like, what was I thinking? They're definitely going to be better than 8 and 9. But when I first did this, I guess I was very pessimistic on their season. And they're going 8 and 9. But,
yeah. It's hard because, like, I think generally we tend to look at every team in a vacuum, right? And you're like, okay, well, this team is better, so they should be better. But there's always teams that end up being worse than we expect, or there's always that injury that happens that we didn't anticipate. And so that's why these predictions end up getting so hard, because if you really sit there and pick like every game, you'll be surprised at like, oh, I thought this team would be better, but like when I actually pick all their games, they're like 6-11 or what, whatever. So it becomes a lot harder than you anticipate. And, and you can't pick every team to be improved. There's definitely some teams who are going to have to be worse. Yeah. And so I don't think it's outrageous to say the Dolphins, maybe Tua gets hurt or.
I think that's where I was going with it, but it's also like, I don't know, the way you talked about the defense just made me think like, if anything, they're probably carrying them, like if that ever came to be the problem.
I do think that defense should be better. I mean, obviously the big question for them is, can Tua stay healthy? But, I think the next big question is, how do those additions of Jalen Ramsey and Vic Fangio change that Dolphin defense? So I did kind of want to look at that a little bit. The first thing I'll tell you, so I went back and looked at Vic Fangio the last time he was a defensive coordinator, which was in 2018 with the Bears. And that Bears defense, if you remember, carried Mitch Trubisky to the playoffs, went 11-5 and went to the playoffs, right?
Is this when they got Khalil?
Yep. That was when they had Khalil Mack and Vic Fangio was the defense coordinator, and they had all that talent on defense. Yeah. Akeem Hicks, like all those dudes. So Fangio that year blitzed 20% of the time, 20.3%. Okay. And then even the next year as the head coach of the Broncos in 2019, he blitzed 24.9%. And then I believe in 2020, so like Vic never had a year where he's blitzing over like 26% of the time. In his last year as a DC, and then the last few years as a head coach with the Broncos. Last year, the Dolphins blitzed 33% of the time.
Wow.
So schematically, the Dolphins, what they did with, I believe their defense coordinator was Josh Boyer, they were uber aggressive. So for instance, against the Bills on a 3rd and 15, look at how they're lined up.
This is 3rd and 15.
3rd and 15. The old school, like engage 8 Madden defense, right? They're going to send the house and play man with everyone. Now, this is what we call a feast or famine defense, because this could very easily end in a sack. But if it doesn't, now you're taking the gamble that all your guys can live in one-on-one and be good enough. This is, I believe, Xavier Howard versus Stephon Diggs up top.
You will see. Make a move.
Well, you will see Stephon Diggs just runs right by him, and that is the problem when you play man coverage like that, is your dudes can get beat. right? I
That's
mean, you see it
wild.
again
All
from
he
this
did was a
angle.
jab step.
He just ran around. I mean, he just ran past him. He's the guy running full speed versus the guy backpedaling. I mean, that, again, what I will say too, and I want to make clear for everyone watching or listening, it's really easy to cherry pick plays and to make your point, right? To be like, okay, well, here's a play that shows like why this Dolphin defense, fans likely sucks. That might be the term that is used. Here's why this defense sucks, right? And I can easily show you a clip that says, oh, here's why this defense sucks. But guess what? I can also find a clip that tells you, look at this Dolphins defense. It's 3rd and 15, and they created a sack. They didn't sit back and let Josh Allen run around and pick them apart. They blitzed him and they forced the issue and they got the sack, right? There are just as many of those plays, right? That's why I say it's feast or famine. And in reality, I can do that for any scheme or any team or anything like that, right? Any player. Same thing with the Zach Wilson, Aaron Rodgers stuff. What I'm asking you to do if you're watching or listening is trust that I watch enough of these. So I'm trying to, enough of this tape that I'm trying to show you what's representative of what's happening more often than the other outcome, right? And so with the Dolphins defense, they were very famine last year. They weren't feasting as much. In 2020, 2021, they're feasting a little bit more with all that blitzing. Last year, not so much. And so I think this is why Mike McDaniel made the change, because he said, you know what, it doesn't fit the personality of what we're doing right now with our team. We need our defense to not give up so many big plays. So enter Vic Fangio, who is going to play a lot more too high style of defense. Vic Fangio plays a lot of the defense, 3-man front, too high safety. That's a lot of the things that, quite frankly, like we do in our defensive scheme. Obviously at a high school level, I'm not saying we're running Vic Fangio's defense or anything by that, but like structurally, it looks similar, right? So he's going to find a way to generally bring that fourth rusher. But other than that, he's not going to bring 5 or 6 a whole lot, right? He's not going to blitz a whole lot. He's going to play a lot more quarters, match quarter concepts with 2 high safeties, right? And so this is a clip from 2018, that 2018 Bears defense I was talking about, where you'll see they'll rotate safeties too. They'll do some different stuff where it starts too high, but they're going to rotate safeties on the snap, and maybe they're getting to, for instance, a cover 3 where it becomes a 1 high post snap, but you just don't see that safety move because you think, pre-snap you see 2 high, right? So this is the Bears defense against Sam Bradford. Again, that Bears defense carried them that year. You see the score 14-3. This was a game the Bears came back and won 16-14, right? So they held the Cardinals scoreless like the entire second half. And this is one of the big plays that they made in order to do it. But you'll see this safety, right? There's another safety out of the picture that you can't see, Eddie Jackson. So it's a 2 high shell. It looks a lot like quarters. But the way this safety sits on stuff, it essentially becomes a 1 high. It ends up looking a lot more like cover 3. Now, Bradford sees this safety sitting down, right? And he thinks he's got one-on-one with the corner, and his receiver is inside leverage of that corner. So he's going to take that one-on-one shot, but look who's coming across over the top. That other safety rotating over. And hence why that 2 high safety, that 2 high shell ends up being so effective, especially if you're moving safeties. And so it creates a pick, right? So there's a very, hopefully with that tape, you can see, while I cherry picked a, maybe tough play for the Dolphins defense last year and a great play for that Vic Fangio defense in 2018 to showcase the difference between the two schematic ideas, hopefully it helps you understand, like, this is going to be a very different looking Dolphins defense this year.
Yeah.
And I think I would say, based on their personnel and based on what they do offensively and the personality of their team, I would guess that this is much more effective for them this year as opposed to what they were doing last year.
Yeah. I mean, they got Jalen Ramsey now too. Could help with that type of schematics too. So it all makes sense. We're gonna be looking at the Bills now, though. We got them finishing last year at 13-3. They were first overall in the division, and that leaves them in the playoffs, losing in the divisional round.
They lost. The big loss for them was Tremaine Edmonds. I mean, I think that was a tremendous loss. And I'll kind of talk about him later, but I do think that's going to be a big hole for them to fill. losing the backup quarterback, Case Keenum, again, these backup quarterbacks, man, they're gold. You got to have them.
Yeah.
And when you don't, it'll show up in the worst way when you're not thinking about it, right? And so I think having him, a veteran guy behind Josh Allen last year, was very helpful. Gave him a little bit of confidence that if anything happened to Josh, they would be okay. And now losing that guy, that makes things a lot tougher. And then I think the next two guys that they lost actually were not the worst thing in the world. It kind of made room for some younger players, Devin Singletary and Isaiah McKenzie. Both like good players for them last year, but I think the Bills were okay with letting those guys walk in free agency because they had other players at those positions that I think they felt were ready to step into those positions. In terms of their key additions, not a whole lot to speak about. They added Connor McGovern, who should slide in at guard for them. Deontay Hardy at receiver. Poona Ford on the D-line should actually be another good rotational piece for the already pretty deep D-line. And then Taylor Rapp could be very interesting on that team. Curious to see what role they have him play. Could play maybe that kind of third safety if they're going like a true nickel versus like a slot corner. It'll be interesting. I think he'll play a decent amount though because they gave him some money. So while he may not start, I think he's going to play enough to make that worth their while. So that would be my guess.
Yeah, and then a couple dudes that they had in the draft that we also talked about. Tight end Dalton Kincaid, my guy out of Utah. We got the guard out of Florida, Osiris Torrance, who we talked about in our draft briefly, and linebacker Dorian Williams. Okay. The reason I said George is when you're doing the phonetic alphabet at my work. That's the G one. So why did I say it? I don't know, but that's but the mindset behind
work
the G.
mode right now.
Yeah. There's their management staff that they got there in Buffalo. They got Brandon. Is it Bean?
Yeah.
Straight Bean.
Yeah.
As their general manager, their head coach Sean McDermott. The offensive coordinator is Ken Dorsey, and it looks like their DC is unavailable. They're on the hunt for someone right now.
It's vacant right now. I'll talk about that too. Well, I'll just say something now. I mean, Leslie Frazier retired in February, I believe, or early March, and they have not hired anyone as the defensive coordinator because the way it was phrased is Leslie Frazier isn't retired permanently. He's taking a 1-year leave.
We're on
So
a break.
he's just on a break right now, and the expectation is that he will be back with Buffalo next year. So I think what their plan is for Sean McDermott to call the defense this year. I mean,
I was gonna say that jokingly, just like Billy B, but I guess it's a real thing.
Yeah, he has 8 years of experience as a defensive coordinator, so it's not like this is out of his realm. That's what he was before he became the Bills head coach.
Gotcha.
So it appears likely that he will be the one who actually calls their defense. They also have a passing game coordinator defensive pass game coordinator in place that I'm sure will help McDermott and sort of assume those responsibilities when McDermott has to be a head coach and cannot be like the coordinator at that moment. So they'll probably platoon it, but it seems like Sean McDermott will call the defense in that 1-year leave of absence for Leslie Frazier. A lot of respect for Leslie Frazier, so that I'm glad that they're like giving him the year and not feeling like they got to replace him. And I think part of that is because Leslie Frazier is so well respected around the league. Looking at that Dolphins or that Bills depth chart, right now, offensive line. They went and said, we're going to get better at the guard spots. Very clear that's what they decided to do. That the tackle spots, Deion Dawkins and Spencer Brown feel pretty solidified. David Quisenberry could be another guy who can maybe play a little bit of right tackle for them if things aren't working out with Spencer Brown or he gets hurt. And then picking up Connor McGovern in free agency as well as drafting Osiris Torrance. Feels like both those guys will play the guard spots. They also picked up David Edwards, another guard that could possibly play, and Ryan Bates. And then they have Mitch Morse, who's been a pretty good center for him. Obviously at quarterback, Josh Allen, but I did mention that Case Keenum left in free agency. They brought in Kyle Allen, Josh's long lost cousin, to be his backup. So now they got the Allen bros at quarterback, little Allen quarterback room. And then at running back, they have an interesting running back room because I mentioned Devin Singletary leaving. I think they're ready for James Cook to assume responsibilities there. But they also brought in Damian Harris on the cheap. And he's a really good player. I like him. I think he could spell Cook. And then they also have Naheem Hines, who's kind of their kick returner, punt returner, third down specialty back, can do a little bit of trickster stuff for him. So they actually have a pretty good running back room that I like, assuming that James Cook can be the lead guy, or maybe Damian Harris can be the lead guy. But from a receiver standpoint, they have Diggs. I think Khalil Shakir steps into that slot receiver spot that is left vacated by Isaiah McKenzie. Again, the other kind of young player I was mentioning that I think they thought was ready to step in. Shout out to Shakir too, because he's from the Temecula, played at Vista Marietta. So shout out to him for making it in the league. And then they also have Deontay Hardy there, that they brought in free agency. He could potentially be a starter for them as well. And then Gabe Davis and Trent Sherfield kind of round out the rest of their receivers. Tight end, strong tight end room. Drafting Dalton Kincaid in the first round to go with Dawson Knox. Don't be surprised to see the Bills in some 12 personnel this year with Diggs and Davis as the two receivers, Kincaid and Knox as the two tight ends.
Yeah.
Sneaky, dirty combination of skill players. Yeah, I like that. Defensively, they have a deep front, dude. Von Miller, AJ Espinosa, Greg Rousseau, Shaq Lawson, Boogie Basham, all as guys who could play on the edge for them. All very productive players in the league. Then inside, Daquan Jones and Poona Ford, Ed Oliver and Tim Settle playing inside for them as well. I really like this Bills defensive front. It's taken them years, like 3 years of building, drafting, bringing in players in free agency, all of that. But they've done a really good job, I think, of building that front. And then behind them, you've got Matt Milano, who's been awesome there for years at the will linebacker spot. Terrell Bernard and Dorian Williams will likely compete for that Mike spot, stepped up to fill the void left by Tremaine Edmonds. Again, he's going to be a tough guy to replace. Go over that in a little bit. That's a preview there for you. And then at the nickel slot, I think Teron Johnson, but then also maybe Taylor Rapp could play there. I said that earlier. And then you look at the secondary, Tre'Davious White, and then Kyer Elam and Christian Benford playing at the other corner spot with Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer, and then once again Taylor Rapp as their safeties. I think this Bills defense is going to be interesting this year. They lost Leslie Frazier, their leader on defense, and they lost Tremaine Edmonds, their leader on the field. So a little bit of new leadership on defense. I am very curious to see how they perform. I'll say that.
Yeah, their schedule, at least in my eyes, compared to yours, I thought was a little bit tougher. They start off week 1, obviously, like we mentioned, Monday night against the Jets in New York. Or is it in Jersey, huh? I guess that's where it really is.
Yeah.
Then they play the Raiders at home. They travel to D.C. against the Commanders week 3. Week 4, they got the Dolphins at home. Week 5, they got the ultimate travel, just like I think the Dolphins is. Yeah, they're going to London. They're not going to Germany. They're going to London against the Jaguars.
Mm-hmm.
Could be tough with Trevor Lawrence picking up gears over there.
Yeah.
And they play Sunday night at home, against the Giants Sunday night. Week 6. Week 7, they travel to New England, play the Patriots. Then they got Thursday night game against the Bucks at home. Week 9, they're going to Cincy to play the Bengals on a Sunday night game. And they have a lot of games right here where they're primetime.
Mm-hmm.
Week 10, they're playing the Broncos at home on a Monday night game. What was that? The little bed right there. What was that indicating?
Yeah,
Oh,
so that is the Broncos get the bye week the week before.
gotcha.
So,
So they're coming
um,
off the rest that week to play them.
yeah, one thing I think people don't pay enough attention to is the rest discrepancy week to week. Generally it's a very good indicator of who may win a game is if one team has a rest advantage over the other team, whether that's coming off the bye, coming off the Thursday night football game the week before when the other team played on Sunday, right? So you have an
Yeah,
extra 3 days of prep. Um, yeah, and so I think that's always something to keep your eye on is just if you have a rest advantage over your opponent. And in this case, the Broncos will have that rest advantage over the Bills. And then obviously, every team has it coming off their own bye, or unless the other team is also coming off a bye. That actually
yeah,
does happen quite a
yeah.
bit. But this is, one week on the schedule. That's one of those games where it's like everyone probably looks at that. Oh, okay, the Bills, they were a better team than the Broncos last year. The Bills will beat the Broncos. But then you really look at it, you're like, hey, the Broncos have the bye week the week before. It's a Monday night football game.
Yeah.
Maybe that's a sneaky tough game for the or for the Bills. So just something to keep your eye on.
And week 11, they're playing the Jets again, except this time at home. And they're playing in Philly against the Eagles week 12, which leads them to their bye week, week 13. And then they're playing the Chiefs, tough one on the road.
The meat of the schedule right here for the
Yeah.
Bills.
They're playing the Cowboys at home. And then they're on the road again, traveling across the whole country, playing in SoFi against the Chargers on a Sunday night game. Then they stay in Buffalo against the Patriots right here. Then they close out on the road in Miami against the Dolphins.
Yeah, I think that last 5 weeks coming out of the bye is going to be a rough stretch for them. They got to go to the Chiefs versus the Cowboys, at the Chargers versus the Patriots, at the Dolphins. 3 road games, including the Chiefs and Chargers are just those are going to be 2 tough games. 2 divisional games to finish out the year, and then obviously the Cowboys. So this is I think those last 5 weeks will be very telling in terms of whether or not the Bills are truly a contender.
Yeah.
I think their quote unquote easy stretch is weeks 2 through 8. Playing the Commanders, Buccaneers, Giants at home, getting to go, to the or the Raiders, I should say, the Raiders, Giants, Bucks at home, and then going to the Commanders. They've got those 2 divisional games with the Patriots and the Dolphins, and then obviously the London game versus Jacksonville. I think is a tough one, but that to me, that stretch, I see them beating the Raiders, the Commanders, the Giants, the Buccaneers. Right, I think all 4 of those should be wins for them, and then the tough games being the division games, and then the Jacksonville game in London will be tougher, but I would anticipate them coming out of that stretch probably 5-2 in that
Yeah.
7 game stretch. So, but in general, I think this Bills team, despite some small changes in leadership on defense, at the end of the day, they still have an MVP candidate playing quarterback, and when you have that, I think that's just good for 12 wins. I just think that means you're going to win 12 games. When you have an MVP guy playing at that level, and I anticipate Josh Allen will, giving him Dalton Kincaid, just another weapon offensively, helping boost the offensive line with drafting Osiris Torrance and bringing in Connor McGovern. I just think their offense is going to be humming so much that even if their defense has a little bit of faults, also don't underestimate them getting Von Miller back healthy.
True.
Uh, yeah, I think that Bills team wins 12 games.
Yeah, so I had them going 10-7. I think mainly it was just like that stretch down the road you talked about being tough, like home away, home away, home away. You know what I mean? And those opponents aren't easy. You got the
Yep.
Chiefs, the Cowboys, Chargers, Patriots, and Dolphins. Like that's all. It's all gonna be tough. And then obviously with the Jets getting better, that's another reason why I got that many losses on the schedule. And then the Eagles and the Bengals, I think, also ones that are very tough for them. And I think that, like you said, with the weeks 2 through 8, Commanders, Dolphins, Jaguars, Giants, I guess you could throw them in there maybe, and the Bucks, all very winnable games like that you'll see. I think you could see them starting off hot, and then down the road of the season, that's when it starts flipping on their luck. But I mean, 10-7 is where I have them finishing. Let's see, how do you think, or I guess how does the replacement look for their guy Leslie Frazier that he quote unquote retired, and then lose the loss of Tremaine Edmonds affect the Bills this year?
Yeah. I was thinking, what the most recent game the Bills played, it was a loss to the Bengals, but Tremaine Edmonds played really well in that game. Um, it's interesting. He had over 100 tackles in all 5 years in the league that he's played. He
Wow.
led the Bills in tackles in 2018, 2019, 2021, and 2022. And in 2020, when he didn't lead them in tackles, he was second to Jordan Poyer, who had an unbelievable year with 124 tackles. So he's basically led their team in tackles in
Yeah.
4 out of 5 years, and the 1 year he didn't, he was second. He started 74 games in that 5-year span and had 5 picks as well. So pretty versatile guy, but just very, and I found some clips in this Bengals game just as I was watching it, okay, let me see where his impact was. And he played a really good game. Despite their defense not playing well as a whole and them losing this game, he played very well. So here he is in the middle. You'll see him getting back in his pass drop.
Yeah.
That's something that a lot of linebackers struggle with. And it's actually interesting. Him and Matt Milano are both very good at this. They're very mobile linebackers. And so he, even as he gets sucked up by the play action fake early for a second, or the appearance of just the back going across wasn't even a fake, he's able to still get depth in his drop and affect the catch of this throw, right? Gets in that guys in that spot and puts a hit on the guy as he drops the ball. Here's another one. He's isolated right now on the number 3 receiver, and that's Jamar Chase. All right. He's out here one-on-one. Now, if Jamar Chase runs vertical, he's got safety help behind him, but on the little in and out route here, he's essentially isolated. Now it becomes 2-on-1 the way this route turns out. But again, how many linebackers in the league do you know that would just overrun this tackle? Because I've seen a lot of them, especially against Jamar Chase, and he makes that play, right? In the stat sheet, it just goes down as a tackle, guy gained 6 yards. But this kind of player is the difference between, look at this, if he misses this tackle, where Jamar Chase is going.
Yeah, open
That's the
field
difference.
against 2 safeties.
That's the difference between a 5-yard
he's
catch and
taking out
tackle.
the other corner too. If he misses this, he's probably hitting the corner, shedding him from making that tackle early too.
Yeah. So this is the difference. A player making this play is the difference between a 5-yard catch and tackle and a 80-yard touchdown, possibly. So he makes a big difference. Here he is again, right here, coming downhill on the run, and you see his strength to just yank Joe Mixon back. Come on, you're not going anywhere. So he's just multifaceted. Did a lot of things for them, run and pass. There's a reason he had so many tackles. Boom, meets him in the hole, brings him backwards, right? This one's even more impressive. It's going to get isolated with Joe Mixon one-on-one, right? You can see him. He's behind the little play button here. He's got to run him down. Again, that's another play in space that just a lot of linebackers struggle to make. This is a drill that we actually do with guys in terms of finding the angle and running on this guy's near hip, right? And just tracking that near hip, not getting cut back on, right? This is the most scary position for any linebacker to be in. One-on-one with all this space with one of the more shifty running backs in the league, right? Joe Mixon. And he runs him down, runs right through that hip. Again, it's another 5-6 yard gain, but the difference between him making that tackle and not is, possibly a touchdown and not, right? Yeah. So I do think that's a big impact. That's a guy that they're going to miss. And I'm not sure that they have what I would see on the roster, would want to see on the roster to just replace him. The tandem of him and Matt Milano have been really good there for 5 years. and not having Tremaine Edmonds is going to hurt, I believe. So I wouldn't be surprised if they start slower on defense. However, as I said, that offense is still so good that I think they'll be okay.
Which leads us to the fourth and final team of this division. We're looking at the New England Patriots. They got a record of 8-9 last year, making them finish third in the division, and they ended up not making the playoffs. It was the Bills and the Dolphins cut that out.
Yeah, they lost a couple guys that they went and signed in free agency a couple years ago. I mean, Jacoby Myers was a homegrown guy, but Jonnu Smith and Nelson Aguilar, a couple guys they signed 2 years ago in free agency when Bill Belichick went on his unusual splurge. They also lost Brian Hoyers, the backup quarterback, and then Damian Harris, who I mentioned. He went to the Bills, and then they added Juju Smith-Schuster. Very interested to see how that works out. But even more important, maybe, is Riley Reif added to that O-line. That's really big for them to shore up that right tackle spot. They added Mike Gesicki, an interesting tight end weapon, and then also added running back James Robinson, who obviously was cut by the Jags, and then the Jets added him last year when their guy went down, or I believe maybe it was a trade. I can't remember if the Jags traded him to the Jets or cut him and the Jets signed him, but one way or another, he was with the Jets most recently, and the Patriots added him to their backfield. So interesting losses and additions from the Patriots. I think they overall came out on top and got better with free agency this year, honestly.
Yeah, and even better, they got our guy Christian Gonzalez, the corner out of Oregon. That's huge. We talked about him a little bit. We were both big on him.
Mm-hmm.
They got an edge rusher, Keon White, and a linebacker, Marty Mapu. So they're just getting guys for Bill Belichick on that defense.
Hey, I'm going to tell you, Marte Mapu is a he's going to be. I think this defense got so much better in the draft this year. Marte Mapu is going to be really good. I'm just telling you.
I gotta look forward to watching that thing because I don't know nothing about him.
He's out of Sac State, so he's a California. Yeah. Sacramento State, and just I'm telling you, I think all three of these guys actually. I was not super high on Keon White coming out either, out of Georgia Tech. I mean, I thought he was a good player. He wasn't in my top 5 edge rushers or anything like that, but I think all three of these guys they make sense with Bill Belichick. When I saw those picks, I was like, ooh, I think he went 3 for 3 on that. And those all three dudes, they're going to contribute to their defense this year. So don't be surprised if that's the case. And we come back thinking, man, the Patriots had a great draft.
Yeah, I know. I'm looking forward now because the way I looked at it, it wasn't looking too good. But looking at the management and coaching staff, you guys got to bear with me. You got a lot of Belichick's coming out. So we got Billy B, the GM and head coach. So my guy's running everything. I mean, if this was last year, he'd be across the board. But they have a offensive coordinator at Bill O'Brien, and then they got his son, right? That's who that is, the DC Steve Belichick.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Bill O'Brien is going to be a huge addition to this team. I'm just telling you, huge. Looking at their offense up front, I don't think anyone's looking at that offensive line and being like, oh, the Patriots have one of the better offensive lines in the league. I'll just tell you, I think between Trent Brown, Cole Strange, David Andrews, Mike Onwenu, and now Riley Reif, that it's a good unit. I don't think it's blown anyone away, like I said, but I think it's a good unit. I think it's improved from last year. I think the fact that they're going to have a real O-line coach this year, and again, this is no offense to the guys they had coaching on their offensive staff last year, but those guys didn't coach offensive football before last year. They were all defensive and special teams guys. So this is a no offense thing, but like seriously, they have a real O-line coach now. I mean, I just think that's going to be better.
Yeah.
At quarterback, obviously they got Mac Jones and then Bailey Zappi backing him up. At running back, they have a trio of Ramondre Stevenson, who's been really good. Ty Montgomery is like the third down back. And then James Robinson, who I mentioned earlier. The receiver spots, interesting kind of group, like a lot of sort of unproven, but like definitely talented players between Kendrick Bourne, Tyquan Thornhill, Juju Smith-Schuster. I love my guy, Kayshon Boutte, who they drafted in the 6th round. I think he's going to be really good. Devontae Parker and then Demario Douglas. So they have an interesting group of receivers there, 6 guys who I think could all potentially be pretty good. And then at tight end, really interesting tight end room, Hunter Henry and Mike Gesicki. I think they are hoping Gesicki will give them what Jonnu Smith never quite did give them. I think they were hoping Jonnu Smith would give them more when they signed him. I think they're hoping Gesicki maybe does as that like kind of pass catching tight end to go with all the things Hunter Henry does. Defensively, up front, you're looking at Matthew Judon. Behind him, Josh Uche. And on the other side, they got Dedrick Weiss Jr. and then their new draft pick, Keon White. Then inside, Devin Goodshaw, Lawrence Guy, and Christian Barrymore. That front is a pretty good front. A lot of like it compares a lot to what I said about the Bills front, where it's just been built over the course of years with draft picks and free agent signings, and it goes really well. I think they actually have a really good group up front. Behind those guys, I'm telling you, I like Marte Mapu and then Jawan Bentley as well. And then also Raekwon McMillan. They have a decent group of linebackers. Mapu's kind of a safety linebacker hybrid guy. I think in the league, he's going to play linebacker, but he's just going to be a very mobile linebacker at that will linebacker spot. And then at the nickel spot, Jonathan Jones. And then at corner, Jack Jones, who was really good last year, going with Christian Gonzalez on the other side, and then having Adrian Phillips and Kyle Duggar at the safety spots, as well as still having a couple talented guys, Jalen Mills and Jabril Peppers. So I really like their secondary. I think this is what I think this Patriot team is going to be. Really, really good defensively. They're young and talented in the secondary. They're young and talented in the linebackers. They're young and talented up front. They don't have a lot of like names that jump out at you, but I think that defense is going to be a very, very good defense with Belichick running the show and then all that talent. I think don't be surprised if they're one of the better defenses in the league. And then offensively, we'll see. I think Bill O'Brien's going to be a much better guy running the show there. They just have to recover kind of still from what they did last year. So, but yeah, I mean, let's look at the schedule.
Yeah, week 1, they're playing the Eagles at home. Tough off the start. They got the Dolphins at home for the following week on a Sunday night game. Then they're traveling for a couple games. They're playing in Jersey against the Jets, and they got to go to Texas playing the Cowboys. Week 5, this brings us to them playing the Saints at home. Week 6, they're traveling to Vegas playing the Raiders. Week 7, they're against the Bills at home. And they're on the road again, Here we go with the common name of home away, home away. You're playing the Dolphins on the road in Miami. And they got nope, that's a lie. They're playing the Commanders at home week 9, and they got to travel to Germany, play the Colts. Could be fun. Good to see some young dudes go at it in Germany. Then they hit their bye week following that game, playing in Jersey again against the Giants this time. Week 13, playing the Chargers at home. Then they got a couple primetime games here. They're playing week 14 at Pittsburgh on a Thursday night game. Week 15, next week after that, they're playing the Chiefs on a Monday night game. That's tough. Monday night. Week 16, they're traveling to Denver playing the Broncos on a Sunday night game. And they got 17 at Buffalo against the Bills. And then week 18, they close out at home versus the Jets.
I'm just going to tell you right now, those final 6 games are tough. They have 3 primetime games in a row.
Yeah.
They're going to play 3 out of those 6 are on the road, including back-to-back road games in Denver and Buffalo in late December, early January. Again, I've said this before with a couple other teams. That end of the schedule is just brutal. It's just going to be a tough stretch. I mean, this AFC East is pretty good, and all these teams kind of have to play each other in those last few weeks. And so it's just going to be, I think it's going to be like a bloodbath for who's getting the division crown, who's finishing second and getting to the playoffs, and then who's still potentially fighting for a wild card as the third team too, and then, having to play the other teams like the AFC West, the Chiefs and the Broncos and the Chargers during that time as well is just, I mean, it's almost like the Patriots, those final, 5 weeks, 6 weeks of the season. It's like they're playing every sort of rival they've had, right? I mean, they got to play the Chargers, which I don't know that I would call a rivalry, but there've been a lot of just like interesting and weird games between the Chargers and Patriots over the years. You think about it, there's just been so many playoff moments between those two teams. It seems like the Patriots always win, but like they've had a lot of moments. The Steelers and Patriots certainly since 2000 has just been a rivalry back and forth. The Chiefs, since really Mahomes and Andy Reid were at the Chiefs, I mean, you know what I mean? That's been a rivalry for them. The Broncos, certainly when it was Brady and Manning and all that. And then obviously the Bills and Jets finishing out the year with 2 division opponents. So it just kind of feels like basically it's 6 straight like grudge match rivalry games, including 3 on prime time, and you got to go 3 on the road. I just think that's a really hard stretch. If they go 3-3 in that stretch, based on the rest of their schedule, they may be a playoff team. You know what I mean? Like that may be a real thing for them. But they have a little bit of an easier stretch. I think weeks 6 through 10, like right before the bye. At the Raiders.
Yeah.
The Bills and at Dolphins, division games could be tough. They can split those. And then I think the Commanders and Colts, they should win those 2 games. I would anticipate those both being wins, even though they have to travel to Germany for that Colts game. So, I mean, I think they could pretty easily win, maybe 4 out of those 5, at least 3 out of those 5. But the rest of their schedule is so hard that I was like, man, I don't see them getting out with a winning record. I think it would take a lot, despite what I think their defense may look like and what their improvement offensively may look like. And my record prediction here doesn't show it. I have them finishing exactly where they did last year at 8-9.
Well, I mean, if that happens, I think it's better than what I have them going at 6-11. I mean, the way I see it, it's just the thing. I don't know where they catch a win, honestly. Like Eagles, tough. Jets, both those games are gonna be tough. Cowboys gonna be tough. Like the Saints, possible. I don't know for them to pull that one out, but who knows? Derek Carr could go out there and start slinging the ball like crazy. And then we got the Commanders. That should be a dub right there, right? And the Colts. So that's like 3 potential ones right there. Like maybe they pull off the Broncos one, like in the Steelers, but those are still kind of tough, and especially if the Broncos get it rolling late in the year, like that's not guaranteed.
To Denver on a Sunday night,
yeah. And then like I mentioned with the Giants, like maybe they pull it off. It could be a close one, maybe game-winning field goal either way. I don't know, but I have them finishing at 6-11. I think it's gonna be tough. And
I think. Go ahead.
No, you're good. You're good.
Well, I was just gonna say, I think they're going to be a better football team this year. I just think they overachieved last year. Like I don't know how that team went 8-9 last year.
Happy.
I almost feel like they should have been like a 5-12, 6-11 team that finished 8-9.
Yeah.
And so I actually think they're a much better team this year. I think they're 8-9 this year. But really, my thought is that I think they're just a little young.
Gotcha.
They're a little bit young. And it's new with Bill O'Brien coming in as the offensive coordinator. So there's a lot of learning curve for Mac, even though I think it'll be better for him. I just don't know that they're ready to. I would not be surprised though if this team is 8-9, 9-8 this year, but then next year is ready to contend for the division. As long as Bill is still there the next year. I do think there's a lot of really good young talent on this team that's ready to step in, especially on defense, man. I really think they have I like Judon. I like Barrymore. I like Dedrick Weiss. I like Mapu. I like Bentley. I like Christian Gonzalez. I like Jack Jones. Like, I think there's a lot of guys on the defense I think there's a lot of guys on the defense that could be really good. So, but go ahead. I know you wanted to ask me something.
Oh, yeah. I'm assuming that's Christian Gonzalez right there, right? Number 0.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sweet,
Yeah.
bro. The zero's sick. I'm glad they're letting
Uh-huh.
him do that.
Yeah. They're letting him do it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And then the bigger question I had was, who do you think are the playmakers on this team, either offensively or defensively? And do you think that Bill O'Brien could help figure out these things with Mac Jones?
Well, playmakers, I think that's where my real question is. I think they have to have some young guys step up in order for them to exceed expectations. And I'm
Yeah.
not sure that they will have enough of them step up quite yet. Like, I love Keyshawn Butte, but I think it's a lot to ask for him to be like one of their 3 best offensive players this year. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And that would potentially what he would need to be for them to be something much better. What I will say is this: Bill O'Brien is going to bring a professional offense to the Patriots. You look at where Mac's numbers were in 2021 with Josh McDaniels. Bill O'Brien is going to bring a similar ideology, I think, to them offensively. And I'll show you kind of what the similarities and what he and Josh do, and that will help Mac, I think, return to form. But Mac completed 68% of his passes, threw for almost 4,000 yards. He had 22 touchdowns and 13 picks as a rookie. Then he
Okay.
comes back in year 2 with Matt Patricia running in the offense and coaching the offensive line. Again, remind you, that guy was a defensive coordinator in the NFL for years, and a
Yeah.
successful one at that, but just had not been an offensive coach in the NFL. And I still don't understand how that happened. It still doesn't make sense to me. But Mac's numbers showed like he dipped in his completion percentage, only 65%. He dipped in his passing yards. He was only around 3,000. He dipped
Ooh.
in his touchdowns. He was only 14 touchdowns. And then his picks actually went down. He was 11 picks, but in general, he was just a worse football player overall with
Yeah.
what they did last year. And so I think if you look at tape from the last time Bill O'Brien was in the NFL, he's calling plays for the Texans in 2019 or 2020, I believe. I can't remember now. But this is that playoff game between the Bills and the Texans. So I just want to look at the series of play calls for the Texans on this
Yeah.
drive. The Texans came back and win this game after being down 16-0, right? And so they start the play. They're going to run a little split ISO, right? Go get 10 yards with the running back. Sweet. Okay, next play of the drive. They're going to come back out. They love that 11 personnel look. Run tight end, one back, 3 receivers. Now he's going to throw a quick game, flat to the receiver. Go get 5 yards. All right, good. Keep the drive going. 2nd and 5. Here we go. What's next? We're going to bring a little motion, right? Play action. Get the ball vertical down the field. Stretch the defense. Fantastic. Right? This is really good play calling. Get the ball in your hands of playmakers. Oh, now we come back to the split zone. All right, split action, I should say. Now we're going to run a little power counter. Now we get to 3rd and 8. We're going to let, Deshaun go make a play and find his best receiver and get him the ball. 1st down.
Yeah.
Now that's a drive that became a touchdown, right? But the sequence of play calling, you could see how the offense is built upon itself, play call by play call. That's a guy who's in a rhythm. That's a guy who understands who his quarterback is. That's a guy who understands who his playmakers are. And this is a game, this goes back to last year or 2 years ago with Josh McDaniels at the helm. And you'll see a very similar style of play calling, right? What do they start with? Hey, that split ISO action. It's like the exact same play, right? Go get 10 yards running the football. Okay, now bring a little motion, right? Interesting that you see more motions and shifts. Play action. Get the ball out. Okay, go get 3 yards, 2 yards, right? Keep the drive going. Okay, now we're going to be creative and put our tight end in motion, give him a jet sweep, and let Jonnu Smith, our tight end, go get us, 6 yards on 1st down. Again, you see more motion. We got a 2nd and longer situation. This is not ideal. Play action pass. Screen. Okay, here we go. We go pick up. Yep.
Versus
Go
tight end.
his tight end again, getting the ball to playmakers. Here we go. This is another creative play. Now we're got a little nub side. Oh, backwards pass, double pass, touchdown. Again, the sequence of play calling, it makes sense. It's professional. It's organized. I think this is where McDaniels and O'Brien are very similar play callers. They can get into a rhythm. They understand where they want to get the ball to. And I think that's just so helpful for a quarterback, especially one like Mac Jones. I do not think Mac Jones is an elite quarterback in the NFL, but I do think he's good enough that you can build an offense around him that will win. You know what I'm saying? I think if you're asking him to make plays and bail you out all the time, you're going to be disappointed. But I think if you're saying, hey, we can build a team around him that can go win and be a true contender, I think that's realistic. And I think last year they were not doing that for him. They were asking him to win and do too much because he had to carry too much of the load offensively, and he was not ready for that, and it showed in his play. And I think Bill O'Brien will bring another level of understanding, in terms of calling and his play calling and sequencing and all that good stuff that is going to help Mac, I think, get back to what he looked more like his rookie year. So while I think the Pats probably missed the playoffs this year, I think they'll be, and I even have them finishing with the same record. I think they'll actually be improved, though. I think it won't be like a fool's gold 8-9. I think it'll be a legitimate 8-9. So that's my read on them.
It's gonna be fun to see with them actually being able to run plays on the offense, given a guy who understands offensive schemes and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just to wrap up here, I have my final standings at Bills 12-5, Jets 11-6, Dolphins 10-7, Patriots 8-9. And then I've got you, Jody, at Jets 13-4, Bills 10-7, Dolphins 8-9, Patriots 6-11. I think we both agree you're probably getting two teams out of this division in the playoffs, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would say so. And I mean, if we had to pick them, it's probably the Jets and the Bills.
Jets and the Bills. Yeah, I think that's kind of where we're both at right now. Yeah, I'm with you. I think the Dolphins could sneak in. Maybe the Dolphins or Patriots could sneak in one of the two.
Yeah.
But I do feel like the Jets and the Bills are probably playoff teams this year. Yeah. But this is the segment everyone's been waiting for right here. It's your week, my man.
Banger of the week. So this one, it was a little bit. I'm going back to the music. I don't know why I've been having this song in my head the past like couple days, just like changing my genre of music just to go hear the song.
Okay.
So I'm rolling with California Day by Common Kings. So it's a reggae band. They I actually saw them live, and that's the first time I ever heard the song. And I don't know, the past couple days just been in my head, so y'all can go check that one out.
All right, expanding the repertoire. I see. I like it
A little bit.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, so check that out, and also check out our guy Ray Riley, who's going to be taking us out today. And also, don't be afraid to come back next week because we're talking about the NFC East. So all you Cowboys, Eagles, Commanders, and Giants fans, come back and figure out what we think their year is going to look like. But until then, we got our guy Ray. Take us out.
Sir.